When German troops first encountered the Soviet Katyusha rocket launcher in 1941, they were stunned by the terrifying wall of fire that suddenly erupted from the horizon. The weapon, officially known as the BM-13, unleashed dozens of rockets in mere seconds, creating an overwhelming storm of explosions that shattered defensive lines and morale alike. Unlike traditional artillery, which fired one shell at a time, the Katyusha saturated entire areas with high explosive rockets, turning forests, trenches, and troop concentrations into infernos. German soldiers quickly gave it nicknames like Stalin's organ because of the haunting wailing sound the rockets made as they streaked through the air. That eerie shriek became a symbol of dread on the Eastern Front. Despite capturing intact launchers and rockets, German engineers struggled to replicate the system effectively. The simplicity of its design masked deep industrial challenges. The Katyusha was more than just a weapon. It was a psychological force multiplier that amplified Soviet artillery power. As the war intensified, it became clear that this rocket launcher represented a new kind of warfare: fast, mobile, and devastatingly destructive. Germany had captured examples, but building a reliable copy proved far more difficult than expected. The origins of the Katyusha date back to pre-war Soviet rocket research conducted in the 1930s. Soviet scientists had experimented with solid-fuel rockets long before World War II, seeing their potential for battlefield use. When Germany launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, the Red Army introduced the Katyusha to defend against the advancing Wehrmacht. Mounted on trucks, often simple models like the ZS-6, the launchers could fire a salvo and quickly relocate before enemy counter-battery fire could respond. This mobility was revolutionary. German artillery, though precise and powerful, required time to reposition. Katyusha units, in contrast, embodied shoot-and-scoot tactics that would later define rocket artillery doctrine worldwide. The Soviet Union's ability to mass-produce relatively simple rocket tubes and mount them on available vehicles allowed rapid deployment. Germany captured some launchers early in the invasion, carefully studying their structure. On the surface, the weapons seemed crude compared to finely engineered German artillery pieces. However, its effectiveness lay not in precision, but in overwhelming saturation. The Germans underestimated how industrial scale and strategic doctrine combined to make the Katyusha such a formidable battlefield asset. Technically, the BM-13 Katyusha used 132 rockets packed with high explosives. These rockets were stabilized by fins and propelled by solid fuel, making them simpler than complex artillery shells requiring brass casings and precision-machined components. The launcher itself consisted of rails mounted on a truck frame, angled upward for firing. A full salvo could be unleashed in less than 10 seconds. The psychological shock of dozens of rockets landing almost simultaneously was immense. German soldiers reported entire units breaking formation under the barrage. Yet despite examining captured rockets, German engineers discovered inconsistencies in Soviet manufacturing that paradoxically made copying difficult. The Soviets tolerated variations in production tolerances, focusing on volume rather than perfection. Germany's industrial culture emphasized precision engineering, which made mass production of relatively imprecise rockets counterintuitive to their system. Furthermore, Soviet rocket propellant formulas were not easily reverse-engineered under wartime pressure. Capturing hardware did not automatically provide the chemical expertise needed to duplicate it efficiently. The Katyusha's power came from combining simple engineering with industrial pragmatism, an approach Germany struggled to mirror at scale. Germany was not unfamiliar with rocket technology. In fact, German engineers were developing advanced rocket systems, including the Nebelwerfer and eventually the V-2 ballistic missile. The Nebelwerfer, a multi-barrel rocket launcher, served a similar battlefield role. However, it was heavier, more complex, and less mobile than the Soviet Katyusha. While effective, it lacked the same rapid redeployment capability. German designers could have attempted a direct clone, but they faced production bottlenecks and resource shortages. By 1942 and 1943, Germany's war economy was increasingly strained. Steel, fuel, and transport vehicles were in high demand. Building thousands of simple truck-mounted rocket systems required industrial flexibility Germany no longer possessed. Instead, the Wehrmacht focused on refining its own systems rather than mass-producing a copy of the Katyusha. Ironically, The Soviet emphasis on simplicity allowed them to deploy thousands of units across multiple fronts, while German rocket artillery remained comparatively limited in number. One critical factor in the Katyusha's success was doctrine. Soviet commanders used rocket artillery not for pinpoint strikes, but for massive preparatory bombardments before infantry and armored assaults. Entire sectors of the front could be saturated in minutes. Germany captured launchers and even used some against their former owners, but integrating them into German doctrine proved complicated. Logistics chains were already stretched, and supplying Soviet-caliber rockets posed additional challenges. Ammunition compatibility issues meant Germany would need to either manufacture Soviet-standard rockets or redesign the launchers for German ammunition. Both options required time and resources. The Eastern Front was a brutal war of attrition, leaving little space for lengthy adaptation programs. Thus, even though Germany had the technical knowledge to understand the Katyusha, translating that into a large-scale production program was another matter entirely. The psychological dimension of the Katyusha cannot be overstated. German veterans frequently described the rocket's sound as terrifying and demoralizing. Unlike artillery shells, which arrived with a whistle or sudden explosion, Katyusha rockets created a sustained howl before impact. This auditory signature became synonymous with impending devastation. The Red Army used these barrages to precede major offensives, signaling overwhelming force. Germany's attempts to counter them with counter-battery fire often failed because the launchers moved immediately after firing. This mobility was a key design feature. Captured units provided insight, but the Germans could not easily replicate the Soviet emphasis on speed and dispersal. Their more centralized command structure sometimes limited flexibility at lower levels. The Katyusha was not just hardware. It was a system of tactics, production philosophy, and psychological warfare combined. Industrial capacity played a decisive role. The Soviet Union relocated entire factories east of the Ural Mountains after 1941, preserving its production base. These factories churned out rockets in staggering numbers. The design minimized expensive machining and relied on simpler manufacturing processes. Germany, under Allied bombing campaigns and resource constraints, struggled to maintain consistent output for existing weapons. Attempting to introduce a new mass-production rocket system identical to the Katyusha would have disrupted already strained supply chains. Captured examples demonstrated effectiveness, but they also revealed that true replication required industrial restructuring. By the time Germany might have implemented such changes, the strategic situation had already turned against them. Chemical engineering posed another obstacle. Solid rocket fuel requires precise mixtures for stability and thrust. The Soviets had invested years refining their propellants. German scientists could analyze captured samples, but reproducing them at scale without risking instability was challenging. Minor variations in fuel composition could alter range, accuracy, or safety. Wartime urgency limited extended testing programs. Germany prioritized advanced projects like jet aircraft and ballistic missiles, diverting expertise from simpler artillery rockets. Ironically, the technologically sophisticated German war machine found itself less able to duplicate a comparatively crude yet effective system. Germany did deploy its Nebelwerfer units extensively, and these weapons inflicted significant damage. However, they did not achieve the same symbolic status as the Katyusha on the Eastern Front. Soviet forces fielded entire regiments dedicated to rocket artillery, coordinating massive salvos that could flatten defensive lines. German rocket units were fewer and often integrated alongside conventional artillery. This difference in scale reflected industrial and doctrinal divergence. Capturing Katyushas offered insight but not transformation. The Wehrmacht adapted tactically, but systemic replication remained elusive. Another issue was vehicle availability. Katyushas relied on trucks for mobility, and the Soviet Union standardized their mounting platforms. Germany faced chronic truck shortages, particularly on the vast Eastern Front. Many German divisions relied on horse-drawn transport well into the war. Allocating trucks to rocket artillery meant depriving other units of mobility. This trade-off limited enthusiasm for large-scale Katyusha-style adoption. Even if rockets could be produced, without reliable motorized platforms, the system would lose its defining advantage: rapid redeployment. The Soviet Union also benefited from Lend-Lease trucks, supplied by the United States, which enhanced Katyusha mobility. These additional vehicles expanded deployment capacity. Germany lacked comparable external logistical support. As Allied bombing intensified, transportation networks were disrupted, further hindering any new production initiatives. The Katyusha thrived within a strategic environment that emphasized mass, resilience, and rapid industrial relocation. Germany's centralized, increasingly bombed industry struggled to adapt similarly. Captured Katyushas were sometimes turned against Soviet forces, demonstrating their raw effectiveness. However, spare parts shortages and ammunition limitations restricted sustained use. German forces preferred systems compatible with their existing logistics. Standardization was crucial for efficiency. Integrating a foreign caliber system risked confusion and supply breakdowns. The Wehrmacht's logistical doctrine favored uniformity, making widespread adoption of Soviet rockets impractical. By 1944, the Red Army had perfected large-scale rocket barrages, supporting massive offensives like Operation Bagration. Katyusha units became central to Soviet deep battle tactics. Germany, on the defensive, lacked both the time and industrial breathing room to initiate a comprehensive copy program. Even advanced German rocketry projects consumed enormous resources with limited battlefield return. Replicating Katyusha simplicity might have been strategically wiser, but institutional momentum favored existing designs. In hindsight, the Katyusha symbolized a clash of industrial philosophies. Soviet strategy prioritized quantity, mobility, and psychological shock. Germany emphasized engineering precision and technological advancement. Capturing the launcher did not equate to mastering the underlying system. The weapon's effectiveness derived from its integration into Soviet operational art and industrial scale. Germany could imitate components, but not the entire ecosystem that made it formidable. Ultimately, the Katyusha rocket launcher represented more than a captured weapon Germany could not fully reproduce. It embodied the Soviet Union's adaptation to total war, rapid production, flexible tactics, and relentless massed firepower. While Germany excelled in technological innovation, it struggled to replicate the Soviet approach of simplified, scalable warfare under extreme pressure. The Katyusha's haunting scream continued to echo across the Eastern Front, a reminder that sometimes effectiveness lies not in complexity, but in overwhelming force. In that sense, the weapon Germany captured, but could not truly build, stands as a testament to how industrial philosophy can shape battlefield destiny.